Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, home of these aggressive tiger bass, and they are getting big. We caught the biggest bass we've ever caught out of the pond this week. You'll be seeing that here in just a minute. But first, we're going to be stocking some big crappie in the ponds, so let's make a quick trip to the old backyard pond. And if you missed our recent videos, we're moving away from this house, so we're transferring all the fish and turtles out to the farm. And we already got Moby moved out there, so now we got to get the crappie, bluegill, and turtle. So catching Moby was pretty easy, but getting the rest of these guys out of here is going to be a little bit of a challenge. So the turtle's not going to be too bad. I think we can scoop him out with a net. But if you look around underwater, the rest of the pond looks like a ghost town. And that's because all the fish are hiding out in the caves. So the best thing I know to do is use this vacuum and drain the pond and see if we can pull those fish out of their hiding spots. Alright, I just spotted the turtle. Let's go ahead and scoop him out. Got him. So this is one of the original Ninja Turtles that lived in this pond, and as far as I know, the last one that's still hanging around. But he's not little anymore. This guy's gotten big. It's hard to believe we hatched him out of an egg when he was just a little bigger than a quarter. But he's had a good life getting raised up in this pond. But now that you've gotten bigger, it's time to move you to a bigger body of water. And he's thinking about making a run back to the pond, and then turns on the jets and tries to run away through the yard. But let's get a little closer look at you. Still got those nice patterns on the belly. Alright, one down. Now we have at least 2 fish to go, a crappie and a bluegill. But you can see as we're pumping this water out, I'm using this vacuum hose to clean all that debris off the rocks and giving it a good deep cleaning. But hey, look who finally came out of the fish cave, the big black crappie we call Outlaw. And this guy's also gotten really big over the years. Look at the mouth on him. But we're going to add him to the transfer tank with the turtle, and that didn't take long. We caught one of the last remaining bluegills out of the pond. So now we're going to bring the fish to their new home, Cedar Falls. It's going to be the same aquascape style pond they've been living in. This one's about 20,000 gallons and has a variety of fish living in it. Alrighty, time to bring the crappie to his new home. Man, there's no telling how many shiners this guy ate over the years. He's turned into a slab. But we're going to add him right over here by the lilies, and hopefully it won't take him long to acclimate. And right away we got some bass swimming over, checking out the new house guest. There's a good look at Outlaw. Man, he's almost as big as some of those bass. And hey, look at there, he just swam past Moby. I wonder if those two recognize each other. I'm sure they do. They've spent a few years together in the backyard pond. But so far, he seems to be acclimating good. None of the bass are giving him a hard time, which is good. And that's probably because he's just as big as they are. And he's doing a little exploring. He's got a lot more caves to hide out in this pond. But somebody's already occupying one of those caves, and that's Jake the Snake, hiding out right there under the log, looking for a minnow. Alright, it's turtle time, and we decided to release the turtle in the 5-acre pond. There's a bunch of turtles in here already. He should fit right in. Oh, look at that. He's got that mouth open. It's almost like he's saying goodbye. Alright, buddy. It's been a good run. Enjoyed the last several years. This is probably the last time that I'll ever look at you and know for sure that it's you. But we hope you enjoy your new home. He put on the jets and said, I'm out of here. So long, buddy. Alright, we got one last fish, and that's the bluegill. We're going to put him in right over here by the waterfall area. Oh, look at there. He decided to actually swim up there in the shallow water by the waterfall. He's the first one to do that. But I'm going to ease over here and see if we can help him get out to that deeper water. And it's pretty shallow in here, but he should be able to make it without an issue. But uh-oh, he's about to swim directly into the bass. But again, fortunately, he was big enough, they didn't mess with him. And one of those guys was Moby, who probably recognized him because he's also lived with him the past few years. But man, look how nice those tropical lilies are looking today. I love looking at them. The bass love hanging out right beneath them. It's just tough to beat that old lily pad pond vibe. Man, you gotta love it. But speaking of lilies, the Amazon lilies are growing. Some of these pads could grow up to 6 feet in diameter. And let's get a real good close look at them. They even protect themselves with those same type of thorns that you'll see on a rose bush, as you can see when we get down here on the underwater bass cam. But now that we're down here, let's go ahead and check in on the rest of the gang. First off, we got the big boy Moby swimming by. And there's a good look at Smalley, the smallmouth bass. And one of the original bluegills we transferred from the 5-acre pond. Moby's swimming around making his laps. But if you watch back in the background, one of the fish that surprises me is the tilapia. They're spawning right now and are extremely aggressive towards any bass that swims near their nest. And there's 2 of the juvenile bass that were born in this pond last year. And there's the bluegill we just moved from the backyard pond. He seems to be acclimating good. And now over on the other side of the pond, we got a nice little school of bass and tilapia. This is where I feed them a lot, so it looks like they're schooling up, thinking it's feeding time. And another one of those tilapia that are growing fast, and that's because they've been eating machines. They eat that algae 24/7. And here we got the smallmouth again. Happy to see him doing good with our outside temps up in the 90s. That's a really good sign that he's going to make it and survive this summer. And another group of tilapia, they've all maintained that bright white look ever since we put them in the pond. And here's a good look at Tiger, the bass that we raised up in the aquarium his first year, and our little guy Spot, the spotted bass, and the aggressive one. And there's one of the little guys. Looks like he busted his lip chasing one of the shiners into the rocks. But I put a camera over in the intake bay where the water's only about 8 to 10 inches deep because I'm always surprised at how many fish use this area. I'm guessing this is where a lot of the bait fish hide out, so you can see all the fish in the pond make their rounds through here, probably looking for a little snack. There's a good up-close look at the tilapia, and another juvenile bass, tasting something up on the surface. I don't think it was food, so he spit it back out. But here's a good look at Tiger, who's becoming one of the biggest bass in this pond. Hadn't missed a meal in a long time. But check out the bluegill we just put in. Almost looks like he's got teeth like a piranha. So I was very interested to see how the bluegill got along with all the other bass in the pond. But then I remembered that this bluegill was raised with Moby. And as you can see, he's not going to let any bass push him around. And we even got the smallmouth up here in the shallow water hunting. But you can tell whenever you see fish activity like this, that they're about to start actively feeding. It's probably a low pressure front moving through, and the shiners don't stand a chance. Alright, now it's time to introduce you to the two newest members of the Crimson Oak Farm. And that's a pair of Ospreys that moved in this past week. So the bald eagles and their two babies have officially left the farm, just like they typically do every summer, and I don't blame them. They probably head up north to escape some of this heat. But the pair of Ospreys have happily taken over the eagle tower nest, and I was very surprised when I started seeing them bringing in nesting material. So the nest is already built, but I noticed they were also bringing in a little bit thicker pieces of wood. But check out this Osprey. It keeps biting at the piece of wood, and I know that eagles do the same thing where they sharpen their beaks by rubbing it up against the wood, and maybe that's what the Osprey's doing here. Not 100% sure. If you guys know, leave it in a comment down below. But it didn't take me long at all to realize how much character these Ospreys have. And I could be wrong about this, but in my mind, the female is the one sitting in the nest right now, and the one that's been bringing in the pieces of wood, and basically the one doing all the work, while the male just hangs out up there on the perch. But after a while, I think the female starts getting fed up with it, and she flies a branch over to the male and drops it on top of his head. That's hilarious. Basically saying, get to work. And you'll see the male peck at it, thinking, what am I supposed to do with this? And you can tell he's just wanting to relax, and he's not really in the working mood, and he's just trying to get that branch out of the way. So he tugs at it a little bit, and then it becomes a nuisance because it's sitting right there in his perch area. So rather than do what his lady wants and use it to build a nest, he's going to do the unthinkable and just kick it off to the side and pretend like nothing happened. And here's where the plot thickens. I could have told the guy that was not going to be his best move, because when she got back and saw that branch down on the ground, she's letting him know exactly what she thinks about him with those talons, and then flies down to the nest thinking she's got to do all the work herself. And just when he thought it was over, she flew back to give him some more. So the moral of the story here is, guys, whenever the wife asks you to do something, sometimes it's easier just to do it. And you can see he's just like every other guy. After the punishment's over, he's trying to make up with her, but she's not having it and is not going to let it go until he builds the nest. So he decides to get to work and starts bringing in branches and building the nest. And the one thing I've noticed about the branches they're bringing in is they are bigger around in diameter, so it looks like they're trying to beef the nest up a little bit, probably due to those high winds we get down here. But the one thing that's a little confusing is that the Ospreys are building the nest here in June. So typically in Alabama, Ospreys will lay their eggs in April and are a lot like eagles and usually lay 2 to 4 eggs. We've already seen several nests with baby Ospreys in them, and as far as I know, they only lay eggs once per season. So maybe some of you Osprey experts can chime in and let us know why they're building the nest this late in the season. Is it possible that they didn't have a successful nest and would lay eggs this time of year, or are they just building it up for next year? If you guys know, leave it in a comment down below. And I've also let you guys name every animal that calls this farm home. So leave us some comments down below on what you think we should name the two Ospreys, and I'll be giving you some more updates on them here in a minute. So here's some really exciting news. I saw the first quail out here at the farm, and that's great because I'm a big fan of quail. Love seeing them around. We planted a lot of bunch grasses and quail habitat, and as far as I know, this one's wild. So hopefully these guys will multiply and we'll start seeing a bunch of them around, even though we do have a lot of predators out here. So now that the pond build is complete, I've really been wanting to create a fishing app that would let you all fish and catch some of these bass that we've tagged and named right here in the Crimson Oak Pond. And I've teamed up with Fishing Clash because I think they're by far the most advanced when it comes to graphics and overall gameplay. And as you'll see here, they've already created incredible places to fish. And not just here locally, but all over the globe. But one of the coolest features is they have dozens of species of fish to target. One of my favorite things to do is open up the app, scroll to a local body of water right here in Alabama, the popular Lake Gunnersville, and try to wrangle up some largemouth and spotted bass. Then when I'm looking for a bigger fight, we head out to the saltwater to really bend some rods. But it's not just a simple fishing app. They have built-in features like clans, so you and your buddies can group up and compete against other clans. They also have a duel feature where you'll go head-to-head against another fisherman. So whether or not you're stuck inside and can't go on that fishing trip because of thunder and lightning, or if you're sitting high in a tree stand waiting on that buck to come out, you can go ahead and download the Fishing Clash app by clicking the link in the video description or scanning that QR code. And when you do, I've got a gift for you that'll unlock a $20 in-game reward. You can access it by clicking the settings, then click gift codes, and type in code BamaBass25, and you'll unlock some cool features, including things like a unique avatar and in-game power-ups that'll make it easier to catch fish. And hopefully after enough of you download the app, I'll have a little negotiating power, and we can talk them into replicating the Crimson Oak Pond right here on the Fishing Clash app. So go ahead and download the game by clicking the link below, and be sure to use my code BamaBass25, and hopefully we'll bump into each other in a fishing duel. Alright, now one of the last things we had to move out of the old house is the 300-gallon aquarium, the old home of Bonnie, Clyde, and Moby. So we're going to be taking it out to the farm and moving it into the shop area. But man, I forgot how heavy this aquarium was. It took 4 guys to move it. So the first thing we did is fill it up with water so we can give it a good cleaning. And we're just going to flush the last of that substrate and any old algae out of the hose and get this thing looking like new. We're moving on to the next step, which is the sump, and that's the filtration for this aquarium. We got it cleaned out, and then we added some bio balls, which are a key part of the filtration process, and they'll allow that beneficial bacteria to colonize, and that plays a crucial role in breaking down the harmful waste that come from the fish like ammonia and nitrites. And then the pump over here on this side and pumps half the water up, which will come out of this pipe, and the rest of the water will come out of the opposite side. Alright, got the aquarium completely cleaned out. The next thing we're going to be doing is adding the substrate. And I'm thinking about doing something we've done in the past, and that's adding some live plants. And this is a really good substrate for that. You can see it comes aquarium ready. It's already got a little bit of moisture in there, but the plants will thrive. Plus it's a good looking black rock, which goes perfect with that backdrop. Alright, substrate's in. Now we're filling it up with water. And man, talking about bringing back some memories. When we first got this 300-gallon aquarium, a fan sent us these wooden block letters. We tried to waterlog them over a period of weeks. Didn't work, so we ended up having to drill holes in the bottom and add weight to them. And finally got it to work. Alright, the 300-gallon aquarium is back in action. But I didn't add any fish this week because it's important to let an aquarium cycle to get those water parameters right before adding the fish. But I want you guys to leave me a comment letting me know what type of fish you'd like to see in this aquarium. We could put some of the prawns in here and watch them grow, or we could catch some of those bass fry out of Cedar Falls, or go with a completely different species. You guys let me know what you'd like to see more of down in the comments. Alright, time to feed the bass here at Cedar Falls. We are going to add 2,000 golden shiners, and we should get to see some big explosions today. So now that we've gotten the crappie added here in the pond, I think our plan of adding one of each species is working out. And the reason I say that is because if you added multiple crappie, they could reproduce, and then some of those little crappie fry could end up down in the 5-acre pond. And if you're trying to grow big bass, you don't want the crappie because they're another predator that feed heavily on minnows and bait fish, things like the golden shiners. But crappie are also known as nest raiders, and will eat a lot of the little bluegill fry and bass fry. So we're doing our best to keep them out of there. But now at Cedar Falls, we have the tiger bass, the spotted bass, the smallmouth bass, bluegills, and crappie. And we initially had some concerns about the spotted bass spawning with the largemouths and creating problems. But since that didn't happen, I feel more confident now that we can add individual species as long as it's just one of them and it not cause problems. So let me know what you guys would like to see next. I've seen a lot of you ask for a catfish, and I'll give you my take on catfish. So we added one to the backyard pond years ago named Shadow. And Shadow would hide all day long, you never see him. But at night he came out and he was a menace. He had a motor that did not stop, and he would swim around on the bottom of the pond and eat everything he could find. And he grew like 4 pounds in 1 year. And he was eating so much, we were struggling to put enough bait in the pond to feed the rest of the fish. but I can't recall what type of catfish he was, a blue cat or a mud cat, but either way he was a species that got really big. So if you guys know of any less aggressive catfish that don't grow 4 pounds a year and eat up all the bait, let me know and I'd be happy to add that type of catfish in, because I do think they'd be a good fit in this pond. But we're also open to other ideas, maybe a striper or hybrid bass. But I also don't want Cedar Falls to get overcrowded, so the next time some of you subscribers come out to the farm, we may catch some of those smaller bass out of Cedar Falls and give them to you guys, because now the 5-acre pond is what we would call fully populated, so we don't want to add any more adult bass unless it's a new genetic we're trying to introduce. And you guys have heard me talk about that in the past, where the 3rd and 4th generations of tiger bass and their genetics may not be as good, so you would start introducing some 100% Florida strain, which should help out. But just from my observations, the growth rates of that 2nd generation bass were really good, and so far what I can tell, the 3rd generation hadn't had any issues. But I know it's only a matter of time, so we probably will be introducing some more 100% Florida strains before this next spawn. Alright, now heading up here to the wetland filter, we can't forget about our little guy Truman. Got him. Let's toss out one more. Got him too. He don't mind eating the big ones. So I was over here hanging out at the waterfall, and check it out. One of the little water snakes hiding out in the rocks right here beside the waterfall. And the funny thing is that one of the snakes liked to hang out here in this exact spot last year. Alright, let's go check in on the freshwater prawns. These guys are getting big quick. Bulking season with that heavy protein diet. And the boys have finally gotten big enough to where they can grab the pellet off the surface and sink it down to the bottom and eat it. Our little babies are growing. I really do think we should at least add a few of these into the aquarium next week. And we got another flood on our hands. And out here at the farm, it seems like we have 2 types of weather. Drought and flood. There is no in between. It doesn't seem like we ever just get one of those nice, calm afternoon thunderstorms. You don't see rain for 30 days, and then you get 30 days of rain all at once. Do any of you guys have this same problem, or is it just us? But look who had to come in out of the rain. It's Gus Gus the mouse. And he's happy that he's got a nice dry shelter. But as you all know, we built this squirrel house several months back, and it seemed like every new week I was surprised when a new critter showed up that I wasn't expecting would ever enter the house. Big-bodied raccoons that would try to squeeze through the little squirrel door. And then after Gus Gus started living in it, the little kitty cat started showing up. And at that point, I was like, alright, I've seen it all. Nothing's going to surprise me anymore. Well, let's just say that the squirrel house is full of surprises. Because I never would have thought in a million years that I would see a snake crawling through the window of the squirrel house. Not just a little snake. This guy's pretty big. Kind of even looks like Jake the Snake. But man, that is wild. I'm guessing maybe he came in through the front door, went out the window, then decided to turn around and come back through the window. But either way, luckily Gus Gus and his babies weren't home. Because this week, the squirrel house has had a lot of visitors. And my best guess is that now that Gus had the nest in the house, the little mice are putting off a smell. Because we had 2 cats show up this week sniffing around, as well as this raccoon, which he's kind of more of a regular at this point. And I always laugh whenever Chip the squirrel peeks his head in the door, and you can tell he's saying, man, they have wrecked the place. And he'll come in every now and again just to make sure there's no leftover acorns. But this is the 2nd cat that showed up. Also looks like it's sniffing around a little bit. But this is the cat that will sit out on the front lawn for hours, waiting on Gus to return. I think they're going to turn it into a cat house. I think she's finally given up. Gonna hop up on the roof for a minute. Alright, now let's go check in on the new backyard pond. And ever since we added this automatic feeder a couple weeks ago, we got some regulars that hang out right here around the dock. If you look closely, you'll see a bunch of bluegills hanging out down there. But there's a nice little school of them that have gotten familiar with the feeder timer and will come up and feed pretty aggressively before the turtles come over. But we hadn't seen any big bass blowing them up like we see at the 5-acre pond. But the one thing I have noticed is that there's some really big bluegills in this pond. I feel like much bigger than at the 5-acre pond. And I feel like there's some guys in here that are well over a pound, but also probably a lot older as well. There's also a healthy population of turtles on cleanup duty. But now let's head over to the 5-acre pond and watch some of those bluegill feedings. And I think that the bass are trying to set the record for how high they can knock a bluegill out of the water. You're going to see some pretty impressive heights today. But I think next week I'm going to catch some of the bluegills in this pond to see how big they've gotten, because I hadn't seen any just jumbo bluegill here yet. But I think a big part of that was after the bass were about 1 year old, which means the bluegill would have been almost 2. We had a bluegill die off at the pond, And the interesting thing is that it targeted most of the bigger bluegills. And after talking to the biologist, he thought it was a bacterial infection and probably related to them spawning. So probably a lot of the bigger female bluegills got that infection and didn't survive. So we lost several of those bigger ones, but it's been a couple of years since then. So next week I'll try to catch some and get a good sample size and see what their growth rates look like. But I do know that it's tough to be a bluegill, because every time you go to eat a pellet, you got a bass knocking you out of the water, an osprey or an eagle attacking you from above. So life for the bluegills can be a tough one. But I've also noticed it seems like the ospreys prefer the bluegills over the tilapia. And that's so interesting to me, because when I fly the drone over, those white tilapia easily stand out much more than the bluegills. So I know for a fact that the ospreys see them, and every once in a while they'll grab one, but I feel like most of the time they're targeting those bluegills. And maybe they just prefer the taste of the bluegill, or it could be that those adult tilapia have already gotten so big that they don't want to haul them out of the pond. But I know that an osprey doesn't have an issue carrying a 2-pound fish, because I've seen it with my own eyes. But one other really interesting thing I've noticed is that the ospreys never target any of the fish in Cedar Falls. And again, they sit right there on the tower, overlooking that crystal clear water, so you know they can see them all swimming around. But maybe it's the movement of the waterfall, but I'm not really sure of the reason. But I sure am happy, because it would be a tough day to watch an osprey flying away with Moby. Man, I'd hate to see that. Alright folks, got a little afternoon thunderstorm rolling in, so we're going to do a little fishing, catch some of these bass and scan them to see if they've been caught before. We'll update the database, but usually these afternoon thunderstorms will have the fish feeding at the surface, so we've got the whopper plopper and a frog tied on. Let's see if we can get a few big topwater strikes. Oh, that's the best strike I've seen in a long time. That fish jumped 1 or 2 feet out of the water, chasing the old frog. Oh, gracious. These fish are eating the frog today. This is a nice one too. Oh, this is a big one. It's peel and drag. Oh, come on in here. It's one of the big ones. Man, what a blow up. Holy cow. That is a giant bass on a frog, and that fish went airborne. Man, what a beauty. That may be one of the biggest fish I've caught out here. Alright, it's been caught. 570540. Moment of truth. Will it break 5 pounds? It weighs 5.68 pounds. What a beautiful fish. That is absolutely how you want to grow them. My goodness. Alright girl, I enjoyed it. That was fun. Go eat some more frogs. Alright, this fish is named Yoshi, weighing in almost at the exact same weight as it did when we caught her back during the survey in the spring. And Yoshi eats a variety of baits, because it's the 5th time we caught her and the 2nd time on a topwater frog. But I have some good news for you guys, because it's the first time we caught a bass over 5 pounds. And when we first started this contest, we set some goals, and whoever's bass was the first bass to reach 5 pounds wins a fishing trip out here to the Crimson Oak. So Josh Cobb, congratulations. This is the 2nd time that Yoshi has won something for you in this contest. But Josh, get in touch with me and we'll plan you a trip out here to do some fishing. Oh, another good one. Man, this storm has got them fired up. Big bass on the frog. Love it. Another really nice fish. Man, what a day. Alright, this fish has been caught. 570687, and it weighs 3.59 pounds. Back-to-back cast. 5-pounder and a 3-pounder. Alright, and this fish is Iceman. She's lost a little bit of weight since the spawn, and also the 2nd time I've caught her right there at the big feeder. There we go. Right off that little grass edge right there. Couldn't stand that frog coming by. It's a good one. Alright, this fish has been caught, 570601. It weighs 2.29 pounds. Alright, and this is Quasimodo, the 7th time I've caught this fish. And the reason I love documenting this, because look at where I caught this fish the last 4 times. I think it's safe to say that Quasimodo lives on the west bank, right there in the grass. Another good one. Oh, frog. Love that sound. Nice fish. Alright, my GoPro died, but this fish had been caught. It is 570027. It weighs 2.95 pounds. Alright, this is Dolly, the 4th time we've seen her, and gained a little bit of weight since the spring during the survey. Alright, the sun's setting. I've got my bucket of golden shiners sitting out here on the dock. Time to feed some of these tiger bass. So I mentioned earlier in the video about adding gizzard shad, and after talking to biologists, one of the main things you want to see in your pond before adding them is a very good population of 5-pound bass. So right now we probably have close to 10, but his advice was wait until it's pretty easy to go out there and catch a 5 or 6 pound bass. And the reason for this is because gizzard shad grow really fast, because they'll swim around and pretty much eat everything from algae to fish pellets. They're not picky at all. And what happens is if your bass don't control the population, the gizzard shad will grow so big that the majority of the bass in this pond right now couldn't actually fit it in its mouth. So at that point, it's just taking up resources from the bluegill and not really providing any benefits. And a really interesting fact about gizzard shad is sometimes when they get so overpopulated in a pond, they have a mechanism of controlling their own population by releasing this pheromone, which will actually interrupt the spawning process and making the gizzard shad infertile. And some reports have stated that that pheromone can even transfer into other fish, for instance a largemouth bass, and create infertility there. So again, it's one of those risk rewards that you may have some fish that could eat the gizzard shad and get big really quick, or you could get a pond overpopulated with gizzard shad and potentially some infertility. So I think we're at a minimum of 1 year away from adding the gizzards. Alright, back here at the backyard pond, finishing up the cleaning job, giving it one final rinse down, getting all that dirty water out of the rocks, because we want it looking good for the new owners. But check out what's growing right there on the waterfall rock. That's pretty incredible that whatever type of plant or weed this is could grow on a rock with water constantly flowing on top of it. Now there's also some really good mosses and things you would expect to see, but not the plant life. That's how you know when you're doing a good job, when the water getting pumped out of the pond looks like that. But now that all the fish are out of here, it's one of the first times we can give it a really good deep cleaning and drain everything down. Scrub those rocks and pump all that dirt and debris out of the pond. But it looks like we still do have some tadpoles living in it. Alright, the scrubbing is complete. Now it is time to start filling this thing back up with water. We're about halfway full now, and I'll have to say this pond looks much, much better now that it's gotten a good cleaning. And we even have some golden shiners that survived. And my favorite part about doing a clean out is when you finish up and turn the waterfall back on. Seeing that water flowing down those rocks for the first time is soothing. And I wish I would have done it before and after. We even have Sarah over here enjoying the waterfall one last time. Man, it's hard to believe that she was a little baby when we first built this pond. Now she's all grown up. Man, time flies. Now the last thing I wanted to do is add a couple of those tropical lilies from Cedar Falls here in the backyard pond. So we brought some over and put them on each end of the pond. A nice finishing touch. Alright, now let's head down to the swamp and see what the wildlife's up to. We got a whitetail enjoying all the extra vegetation. Mr. Raccoon late for work. We got a small little buck deer starting to grow out his antlers, and he's on to us. And I had to slow that down because I couldn't quite tell what jumped over the log. Maybe a raccoon, maybe a fox. Now here's something you don't see every day. A pair of armadillos swimming across a creek. Haha. Mr. Raccoon in the thick of it. And hey, there's a buck deer starting to grow out the antlers. Time to put him on that heavy protein diet. And man, the raccoons have been active all night and all day. Now there's one of the ospreys targeting one of those shallow water bait fish. Although it does look like it missed. And we got some more whitetails enjoying all those summer crops we planted for them. Alright folks, that is going to wrap up this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, as well as download the Fishing Clash app by clicking the link in the video description. Hope you all enjoyed this video, and we will see you all next time.